Today, what we are doing on the CanAm build is we are installing this cage. So this is an Extreme Performance 1 cage. The cage is completely TIG welded on everything. All the seams, everything is TIG welded on this cage. This cage is painted white. A couple things that I wanted to go over how a stock cage fits onto here is that at each pillar, so the A pillar in the front, the B pillar in the middle, and the C pillar right here, the CanAm cage is welded to this plate. The cool thing is that these 4 bolts, this flange right here, this black flange, was already here as part of the factory lower frame section. So we did not add this lower flange. So then the aftermarket cage company builders, they take and build a flange to fit this plate. So we literally took a Sawzall and we cut the cage off on this car at all the pillars. So the factory cage comes in, welds into the top of this plate, it welds into the top of this B pillar plate, and then it welds into the top of this A pillar plate. On this cage by Extreme Performance 1, there's also a side intrusion bar that comes down. This piece is not on the car. We welded this piece onto the car to accept this side intrusion plate. There's pre-drilled holes through this entire cage for all the wiring to come through. So the light bar that's mounted up here with all the Baja Design LP9 lights, all the wires are going to be hidden. They're going to be run through the cage, and then they're going to go to a Switch Pro switch in the center console dash. And we'll kind of talk about the dash layout in a little while. After that, so this is not in its completed form because on this cage, Extreme Performance 1, they allow the use of the stock CanAm plastic covers to go around this flange. So with a little bit of trimming and cutting. So this isn't complete yet, but when it's complete, we're gonna have the entire stock plastic shroud surround. You can see here's the back of it, and it just kind of clips on over this. It's gonna come right up over to here, and it's gonna surround this entire piece right here down, right on all the pillars. Extreme Performance 1 does a really nice job of fitment, and like the final fit and finish is very nice. We are doing a full set of Baja Design lights. These are the LP6s. I call them a pod because they look like a pod. This has 6 LED lights in it, and it also has like a daytime running light behind it, which is kind of cool. So this car is going to be decorated in some European styling from like an old 80s race car. So we went with like the Euro amber lenses on the front, just for the cool trick look. For the top, we went with the LP9s. Same idea as the 6. It has a daytime running light. It has 9 LED little pods in here, super bright. 2 of these are spots, and then 2 of them are floodlights. So this thing's gonna put out a lot of light. And then going to the back, and for the rear, we have the Baja Designs RTL light. This light has like amber and red tail lights, brake lights. I think you can even put turn signals in this, which I don't have a turn signal switch for, but it's just gonna be mounted up here. Really trick, nice setup for a rear light. We are installing a bigger turbo. It's going to be running on E85. So where the turbo gets mounted to is where this blue tape is. That blue tape is on the cylinder head, is covering the exhaust ports of the engine right now. So here is the stock turbo right down here. And you can see the sizing comparatively when you just compare these 2 guys side by side. We have this turbo, which is the stock one. This is 173 horsepower rated from the factory. And then we're gonna move to this turbo, which is much larger in comparison. And this turbo, I don't know what the flywheel horsepower rating is, but the rear wheel rating is 240 horse. So it's about 140 stock at the wheels, so 173 flywheel, 140 wheel horsepower, and we're moving to 240 wheel horsepower. And what we also did with that is we installed different fuel injectors. So this is a 3-cylinder. So it had 3 injectors. We put larger fuel injectors in it to run E85. We have to flow more fuel. 1, 2, 3. There is going to be a different tune on this engine because you cannot run a stock tune on E85 with that much more boost and that much more injector. What we're also installing is a different exhaust system. So this comes off of the turbocharger, and then it wraps around the side of the car. And then here's the muffler. It's still wrapped in plastic, but the tailpipe is pretty cool. So the tailpipe is kind of like it's like a hand-coned pipe, kind of like a 2-stroke hand-coned pipe. So that'll be really trick when it goes on. Because we're going with the Euro theme, is we're putting sparco seats in it. The sparco seats cannot go on top of the factory Can-Am sliders because then it would be too tall and you'd have headroom clearance issues. Or you could run it without a slider and kind of bolt it down, but I wanted to have the ability to slide back and forth on all 4 seats, especially the left front for the driver and the right rear, because that's where the battery's located. So if you ever had to jump start it and access the jump start, the battery area, you want to be able to slide that seat, the right rear seat, forward, unless you put an auxiliary jump post on it, which I may or may not do, but all 4 seats on this car are going to have sliders. So what we ended up doing is you can kind of see on that side is the stock setup. It's like that on all 4 corners, so it kind of looks like this. This is what the drivers look like, this big giant bracket. The bracket wasn't giving us the right height, so we cut that bracket off. We installed this bracket on right here, and we have mocked up this tube. This isn't our final product. I'll show you the final product when it's done, but this is how we're installing the sparco seat. So roughly just like this, different bracket welded on, and then we're just gonna put the seat sides on from sparco and then the seat slider on to that, and it fits. We already mocked it up, I sat in it, and it's dialed in. We're going with impact safety seat belts, and we're doing the clip-in style, so in that case if we have to remove the seat belt for whatever reason, we can. This is the eyelet that we're going to clip into. This is the stock, it's not tight yet, this is the stock seatbelt bracket that comes on the 2019 Can-Am. We're going to try to utilize this bracket. If we can't, we're going to cut it off and make our own bracket. But for now, I think we can actually make this work. Also, what we're doing is a really cool center dash display. So the buttons are, the dash is still incomplete in here, but you can kind of get the picture of what's going on in here. The Lowrance is going to go right into here. And then we've got some factory buttons right here. And then this is a Switch Pro setup. I've got 8 different switch controls. It's gonna trigger the upper lights, lower lights, buggy whip lights, the RTL lights. I guess we could do a turn signal here if we wanted. The Kenwood radio is gonna go in here, and then the PCI controller is gonna go right there where that is. You can see our factory start stop button is relocated. It's relocated down here on the very bottom. It used to be kind of up here. This upper dash area right here all had to get cut out. So if you look down inside there, you can see this cut line on this plastic right here. So that's the factory dash that got cut out. You can kind of follow that around and see how we cut it out. Yeah. So over on this side, you can see with all this stuff exposed, I always wonder where everything ran. So on this side, you have the coolant feed and return. It runs all the way to the front of the car because that's where the radiator is. It has to be pumped all the way to the front and then pumped back. You can see this is the front drive shaft right here. This goes up to the front differential, and that's what gives you the 4x4 ability. We've got the dash. The dash is pretty much fully built, and we've got all of our electronic components in here already, right? So we've got the radio, we have the Switch Pros 8-gauge cluster, and then we have the car-to-car. So what we've kind of decided to do here, so Steve is wiring all this stuff over here. So there's Steve right there. He's just working away. And the Switch Pros has this like a controller, right? What do they call this guy? The switch panel, right? So we're gonna mount the switch panel up inside here. This is what takes the power wire, and then all the loads run through this component. So we're mounting this between the rear seats in this 4-seater car. It'll be underneath this center console apparatus. It's gonna be covered, right? So the Switch Pros is just like, basically like a small gang of wires right here. It comes in from the Switch Pros switch up on the dash that you just saw. And then here's all of our outputs. So all of our outputs come out, and we're gonna run upper lights, lower lights, buggy whip lights, one switch per buggy whip for 2 whips total. What else are we doing, Steve?
2 whips. Remote start, and then the reverse light on the back.
Okay, yeah, so this thing, so the Switch Pros is Bluetooth compatible. So you could have your phone, you could like push the button on your phone, right? And it syncs up to the phone. So we're gonna have the start feature through the Switch Pros. So I'll be able to start the car and warm the turbo up, say, for 2 minutes before I get in the car. Same thing with all the lights and all the other lighting and all that stuff. It can all be Bluetooth compatible from my phone. We're going to make this into an H-frame so we can put our 5th harness point down through here with a bung welded in, and then we'll have a full 5-point harness. You can see over there on the passenger side, we've cut the factory bracketry off, and we welded our own brackets on, and then we made this frame system. This frame system will have the same thing, so we're gonna have an H-bar running across for the lower, the submarine mount they call it, the crotch strap. And then we'll do the same thing with the rears. That'll be the Sparco seat setup. The turbo's getting complete. A couple little hiccups there. We didn't get the studs in the kit that hold the turbo onto the manifold. So what we did is we shortened the bolts, but then we found out that we shouldn't have shortened the bolts. So we're gonna pull that turbo back off and put the put studs that are coming from Packard. Exhaust looks pretty nice. It's just a muffler with this nice little hand cone tailpipe. I love hand coned anything exhaust. It just looks really cool. Right here we have the clutches. The clutches are both removed from the car. This is the clutch that goes on the crankshaft. This is the primary clutch. This is the secondary clutch. This is the plate that you release when you go to change a belt out there in the middle of the desert. You spin a threaded rod into here, and you could, by whatever means, there's a bunch of different tools that can do it. I have one of those quick release ones, and it opens this plate up. Anyways, this is going to be on a floating hub now. So as this clutch changes its pitch through RPM, as this comes in and out to change the final gear ratio of the belt, this clutch over here used to be stationary, mounted stationary on the transmission. Now it's going to float in and out. And what we're doing is we're reducing the side load of the belt. So as the belt has side load applied to it, the belt overheats, blows up, and it grenades inside the belt housing. That's not good. So hopefully now I'll be able to get more than 250 miles out of a belt. This is getting sent out to KWI Clutches, and they're out of Illinois. And we're gonna have both of these pieces modified, put them back in the car, and see what kind of belt life we can get. We've separated the transmission as far back as we can from the engine, so much so that we've released the seal on the O-ring. It's dripping oil out of it right now. And the case is contacting the rear of the frame, so we cannot go back any further. Going going to hoist the engine. We have the engine held in right now with one bolt. We're gonna secure the engine with a cherry picker, and we're gonna pull that bolt and let the whole entire assembly slide forward. And that'll give us enough room. We need another couple inches back here. That'll give us enough room, enough clearance to remove the transmission. And then we'll probably kind of like jimmy the engine back into position, put the one bolt back in. We're gonna let this kind of stay here and help us support it. We need something to tension this engine up with. So either a chain right from upstairs there, or even like an old seatbelt. Noah might have one.
It's close. Yeah.
It's out.
Here, I'm not holding the front, I'm just holding the back.
Yep, I got it.
Got the front still?
Yep. Now we have the transmission out of this Can-Am, and we're going to take it apart, and we're going to send it off to get cryo heated. Start taking those bolts out. This is the input shaft into the transmission. And then we have our output shafts over here. One for the rear axle on this side, one on that side. Front drive shaft, output shaft is right here. We gotta we gotta be very careful because there's sand in there already. So be careful, it's all gonna get washed out and cleaned out. So we'll be safe. So to give you a couple nice places to pry on, one right here and one right here. Hold that guy. There we go. I can kind of pop it a little bit. Get our tool. This is the tool area. It's not the sealing surface. So we've got some giant nuts that hold all this on. Same thing there. We've got to figure out how to hold this and loosen this. We have right now the transmission, the input shaft is pointed down right now. So that should be, this is the left side is pointed down. So you can see what we're going to start doing here is you can see all these different gears, a PTO drive for the front, drive shaft. Here's our output shaft for where the axles clip into. So this is the ring and pinion. It's actually run off of a bull gear style. So we're just going to start taking gears out. We're going to start with this one. So this gear comes out. All right, Sean, and let's put that right on the floor. And then just take that guy and put it right in there. So the whole purpose of this is we're gonna go send all these gears out to get cryo treated. Gears, bearings, all that. Come on, this is the shifter. This is gonna come out.
Also going to cryo?
Also going to cryo, absolutely. And here is the shift forks, very similar looking to a motorcycle, like the inside of a dirt bike. So if you've had the inside of a dirt bike out, the shift drum, very, very similar. Okay, so we are in the final teardown of the Can-Am transmission. I needed this special tool right here to grab onto the input shaft, to loosen this nut for the pinion, to remove this pinion gear, right? So this is a tool that I bought right from Can-Am. It's part number 529 036 389. There it is. So that's just gonna hold this guy like this. Then we're gonna get a big giant wrench, 1 3/4 inch. And we are going to loosen this guy like so. It definitely feels like there's a little bit of Loctite still on here. And it's just a regular old right-hand thread, so don't try to go backwards or whatever. It looks like it's left-hand thread, but I'm tightening the shaft, but I'm loosening the nut, so I'm just holding the nut, that's all. So now we can remove this guy. There's no shim here. Okay, that's good. What we're gonna do is we're gonna pull this shaft out right here. Now this, you know, I call it the input shaft. It's also the pinion. This is gonna get cryo heated. So this whole thing kind of comes out as an assembly now, right? So that just kind of fell out, yeah. This is our shift drum. It's kind of like a motorcycle shift drum, just way bigger. This thing's a behemoth, right? This is just like what I took out of my CR250, TRX250, CR500, same kind of looking thing, it's just way bigger. So you can kind of see how that has to come in and out, right? You kind of pull this guy up a little bit, the whole gear stack comes up, shift drum comes out with it and falls out. Okay, now this whole stack is gonna come out. Just be careful, try to pay attention here to see what we got. So we've got two different shift drums happening right here. So what I'm gonna do is kind of take these guys out as an assembly like so. Put that down like that for a second. And now we've got all these different gears right here. So this came out like this. That bearing went right in there like that. And then this washer, it's like a nice big giant thrust washer, went down just like that. And then we're gonna remove these bearing retainers, probably remove the bearings, get this thing cryo treated. We got 3 LP6s down here and 5 LP9s up there. The wires are all pulled through the frame. So we got wires coming down right there. We've got wires coming out the back of the cage for the whips, the radio antenna for the Lowrance, and then we're gonna run this Lowrance antenna down through here. So there's an FM radio antenna and then also a GPS antenna. We've got all of our wiring coming along the center rail down here, and this is a factory unit that is the positive feed and the ignition on for the car. So we've used this as ignition on and positive feed. Here's a fuse block that's going to power these relays. We have a Switch Pros unit in here. The Switch Pros unit has 8 different switches. 4 of the switches can power a 35 amp circuit. The other 4 circuits can power a 20 amp circuit. These lights draw 9 amps a piece. So if I turn all 5 of these on, we have a 45 amp draw. The Switch Pros safely can't turn all of those on with one switch. So I want so for me, because I'm older and a little bit blind, I want these on all the time. I don't want 1 of these on or 2 of these on or 3 of these on. I want 5 of these on. So one switch is gonna operate all 5. We've split the circuit from Switch Pros to run that on 2 relays. We have 3 relays right here. 1 relay, well, we'll get to the 1 in a second. The 2 relays operate on 1 switch on the Switch Pro, all 5 LP9s. 1 switch, 2 relays, 1 fuse. That's the proper way to wire and run a circuit so you don't overdraw too much current on 1 switch. So that's how we're turning these guys on. The lower units are on 1 of the 35 amp Switch Pros brain because that draws less than 35 amps. So that's gonna take 1 35 amp Switch Pro gang slot. We did not put a relay to the front lights because we don't need to, because the Switch Pros can handle that. All of the LP6s and the LP9s have a backlit running light. It's a little yellow, nice dim light. All of the 8 running lights come on all at once as soon as the ignition's on. So that is keyed on with ignition. We ran it on this other relay down here. So there was 3 relays down in that junction box, in the junction box that we made. One of those relays powers all 8 running lights by just turning the ignition on. And that way this car has plenty of front visibility. So if somebody is coming at me, if somebody's looking at me in their rearview mirror or whatever, they'll be able to see the car with 8 running lights. My kid follows me on his quad, my son and daughter. And so what they can do is they can actually ride in front of me, and then they can take a quick glance back and see that there's 8 yellow lights, yellow driving lights coming at them. So it's just easier for them to identify who I am. So those are all on at the same time. Those do not run on the Switch Pro. We have the RTL going on this car, and it's got an amber light, a red light, and 1 white light. So an amber and red on each side, and then 1 white light. The white light is going to be on one of the Switch Pros. So we're gonna power the white light on with that. We're gonna power the rest of the RTL with running. So when the ignition is on or the key's on, it's just gonna turn the amber and the red light on. There's also a brake light on this car, so it's gonna get brake light input from the factory brake light. It's just gonna go right up to the RTL and turn the brake light on. It has a dual battery mount underneath the right rear seat, plus a larger battery mount for where the factory location is. So we added this larger battery. Then I was going to put 2 batteries in here, one here and one here. There's still a place for it, but I picked this battery up and it weighed way too much. It was very heavy. If I put 2 of those batteries in, it's just gonna weigh the car down too much. There's an on-off switch right here. So when it's in storage, I can turn both batteries off. I could run it on 1 battery if I wanted to, which I don't see why I would, or I can run it on both batteries at the same time, which that's where I'm normally gonna run this car. There's an isolator. So the isolator isolates the battery with the ignition off. So if I want to stop on the top of Lights Out Hill, or what everybody calls it, Sunset Hill or whatever, in Glamis, I can turn the ignition off. It's gonna kill the power output from 1 battery, and it will take it from another battery, whichever one we chose. Steve, which one did we choose to kill?
We still kept this as the main battery.
Okay, so this is our main battery.
This will always be your start battery because that's what powers the accessories. This, if you don't use your override switch, this was still going to isolate the 2 batteries. And we're pulling from the accessory battery. That's where we're powering your radio, your GPS, the Kenwood radio. We're making this today to make if you leave that going on, and you're parked, and you're on there. This will pull power, and it won't pull from your starting battery, so it won't leave you stranded.
Okay, cool. So when we shut the car off, this isolator kills this battery?
Yeah, your pull is going to come from this, even if you don't flip your switch. Got it.
So the switch is going to remain in both positions. I'm not going to touch that. I'm really probably never going to use this, except for when I park it in the summer and I turn it off, and I just want the entire car to be off. So when we kill the ignitions, turn the engine off, I will pull all my accessories. I don't run a stereo. I don't listen to loud music from the outside. I only listen to it in my headphones. I could still have the radio on, the Kenwood radio for communication. I can still have the Lowrance on to see where I'm at if I wanted to see that. And then I can have individual whip lights on. I can also have individual front lights on just for a visual. That's all going to pull off of this battery for as long as I want it to. I could basically wipe this battery completely out if I wanted to. Then when I want to go start the car after it's been sitting for a little while, it turns, this isolator sees the input and it turns both batteries on, And it's basically like this one's jump starting this one if I ran it all the way down, which I'm not actually going to do that. But that's what this isolator does. So when I stop and everything's still on, I'm not worried about not being able to restart it because I've worn the battery all the way out. That's what that does. None of this stuff, the brain boxes or the fuse boxes, is actually mounted yet because we're still in a temporary phase, but we're getting very close. So we got a bunch of wiring run pulls. This is for one of the whips right here.
Correct.
And the other whip light.
Yep.
So he had to pull all this down. Did all that come down the center tube, or that was just the dome light?
That all that main wiring came down the driver's side tube, which we used that whole channel pretty much. These guys and dome antenna came down this path.
Oh yeah, because we didn't want to have that.
From here all the way home run down to the front. And so when I came in here, I could get a visual, and I was able to run one wire feed with a knot at the end, and use this to bring another one in and catch it with a hook, and then pull that feed through.
So you're kind of like what you were like feeding that down like a camera, and then you were fishing a hook down there,
and
you're
that's
just kind of watching
to see
what was happening inside there. Oh, that's pretty cool.
And there's no way that I see that there was any way you could do this job without this tool. Otherwise, we'd have ran zip ties along this frame, and that's not the look we were going for. Just to get it to go
So
over
part of
this
the pull
lip
that
here.
Steve was pulling across into there was these dome lights. So this dome light goes down this tube and then makes a left inside that tube, and that's why he had to use the scope to go grab that two wires. So there's two sets of dome lights. There's one here and then there's one there. We're gonna actually use a dome light switch very similar to a car, but it's gonna be a magnetic pickup feed. And when either of the front doors close, it's gonna come into contact, the magnet's gonna come into contact, and it's gonna turn the light off. When it opens, the magnet's gonna pull off, it's gonna turn the switch on, and then the dome lights are gonna turn on, just like how it is in a car. That way we don't have to get into a dark car and then turn a light on, reach over our head, do all that kind of stuff. So when you wanna turn a dome light on, all you do from inside the car is just open it like that. Because we are installing a bunch of lighting systems and Lowrance and communication systems, we are drawing more current out of the car. We figured that the lights, I think there's 8 or so lights going on plus a rear light. It's gonna draw about 40 amps of current when they're on high beam. And that is gonna be too much for the stator to handle. So what we did is we got the Zollinger Racing stator cover. And what that does, you can see this alternator right here, it allows for an alternator to get used. It's a pretty trick setup. What they have is the stator cover that has an alternator built down in here to the bottom. It's a 70 amp alternator, and it's run off of a belt, which is run off of a drive that is going to be driven off of the crankshaft. So this is the stock crankshaft bolt that came off of the crankshaft behind the stator. We installed a new bolt in the crankshaft, and it has a head that looks like that one. Kind of looks like a flower, right? So that bolt is going to be received into here. So if I turn that with a tool here, we can see that belt move, and that's going to drive the alternator now. That is the main feature and benefit of installing this cover on. We're going to get another 70 amps of power. We are going to run the stock stator at the same time. We're going to torque our factory magneto stator winding back down. The torque spec on this guy is 9 Newton meters. Oh. See what we got here. Yep, 9 Newton meters. Okay, so we're going to tighten this guy down. And these are installed with blue Loctite. The crankshaft bolt, so check this out. The crankshaft bolt is in the same shape as the thing that looks like a flower right there. We installed the new crank bolt that drives the alternator and the belt for the alternator To loosen the crank bolt and to tighten the crank bolt, you need to lock the crankshaft. Now, down behind the starter, there's a little Torx bolt that you remove, and they call it a plug. It's like a drain plug, but it's up high, so nothing's going to come out if you remove it. And then we made our own locking tool. So this is just like a long bolt. I don't know, maybe it's 50 or 60 millimeters long. It's an 8x125, and we spun these threads off of it, almost all the way off of it. And we made this little tip point. We just basically copied the one that they sell for doing the lock crank on Amazon. And we just machine these down in a lathe. And there's a little V-notch in the crankshaft, so you can spin the engine over and find the V-notch, and then install this lock into the V-notch. And then that's what held our crankshaft into position while we were loosening and tightening that new bolt in. That gets torqued down to 80 foot-pounds. To summarize, what we're doing is we're just putting another 70 amps of current into the batteries, so all the stuff that we're putting in it can keep up with everything. So Sean has been working on this CanAm project this entire time. We spec'd out some Sparco seats and some Sparco sliders as well for this CanAm. And we could not utilize the factory seat brackets or sliders. So Sean made this. So tell us about this thing, Sean.
So this is just a simple H-frame with 3 threaded bungs that are welded in so that the seat belts can attach to that. And the reason why the rear ones aren't square, where these 2 points taper in, the stock CanAm mounting points aren't square to one another. So this was what I came up with to easily bolt a Sparco slider and a Sparco seat into a CanAm without modifying the chassis at all.
This bolts in to the factory mount.
Yeah.
We have a threaded bung that threads into the side here for the seat belts, so lap belt, and then a submarine belt, they call it, the crotch strap.
Yeah.
Cool, so you welded all this together,
Yep.
Designed it.
And then these are all counterbored so that the nut that holds it on can fit inside of the tubing, and then the stud can be cut short so that the slider can slide over top of it.
Cool, and then what's our thickness on all this?
This is 1.25 inch diameter square tubing, 120 wall, so basically 1/8 inch thick.
So pretty thick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's what any race car would be made out of, is 120 wall tubing. And then these bungs are actually what you would use to make tie rods. They're a 1/2 inch 20 thread, so 1/2 inch fine thread.
So
And that's
large
what the seat
bolt.
belts are. Yeah,
Yeah.
a large, strong,
170,000 tensile
pound tensile strength.
Okay, cool. Sean has made all 4 of these, one for each seat. The hard work is done, which was making this bracket. Now it's all about just bolting it all together, and it's going to be done. We've got the car back from the wrapper, and you can see it is in the 959 Rothmans livery with the red, white, and gold stripe, and then the blue lower section. We showed you the Sparco seat frames that we built, but now it has the Sparco seats that are in it. It has automatic dome lights, so when you open the door, the dome lights in the front and the back both turn on, and you close the door and then they turn off, so that's pretty cool. That'll be a nice easy enter and exit when it gets a little bit dark. We've got our turbo system all hooked up, coolant's flowing through it, oil's flowing through it. We also have the tuner. We're gonna keep it right here just for quick, easy reference. While out, but this is the tuner that went into it. It's a Dynojet tuner with an E85 tune. This car has 2 fire extinguishers. So there's one right underneath the driver's legs right here, and then there's one right behind the passenger seat. Where a lot of people put fire extinguishers is in the back, like on this rear roll cage section. But if the back of the car is on fire, you're not going to come to the back of the car to access the fire extinguisher. So that's why they're both in the cabin. Another reason why it's in the cabin is because if the inside of the cabin catches on fire for whatever reason, we can very quickly, we have access to 2 different extinguishers. Really the only thing that matters is the people who are inside the cabin. The rest of the car, we jump out, it burns to the ground, adios, bye. But we want to protect the people inside the cabin. So fire extinguishers that are out here, never really made sense to me, so that's why I don't have them out here. We have the aftermarket Baja Design 9-inch lights up there, the 6-inch lights down here, and it still also runs the factory front LEDs as well. Same thing with the rear stop lights and also the Baja Design rear tail light kit as well.